On January 27, 2025, the city of Goma fell. After a tense 48-hour standoff, M23 rebels, backed by Rwandan forces, seized control of this strategic city in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This marked a significant escalation of the ongoing conflict in the region. The fall of Goma, home to over 2 million people, sent shockwaves through the nation and the international community. The rebels' advance was swift and decisive. They quickly overwhelmed the Congolese army, who were seemingly caught off guard despite the looming threat. Gunfire erupted throughout the city, sowing fear and chaos among the civilian population. Thousands were forced to flee their homes, seeking refuge in makeshift camps or across the border. The M23 wasted no time in consolidating their control over Goma. They established checkpoints throughout the city, asserted their authority over local governance, and declared their intention to remain. This audacious move signaled their ambition to not only capture territory, but also challenge the legitimacy of the Congolese government. The capture of Goma represents a significant turning point in the conflict. It has raised fears of a wider war and a deepening humanitarian crisis, prompting urgent calls for international intervention. To understand the current crisis, it's essential to delve into the origins of the M23. This rebel group, whose name stands for the March 23 movement, is not a new phenomenon in the tumultuous landscape of the DRC. The M23 emerged in 2012, born from the ashes of a previous rebellion. It is predominantly composed of Congolese Tutsis, an ethnic group that has long faced persecution and marginalization in the DRC. The group claims to fight for the rights of Congolese Tutsis, alleging discrimination and violence at the hands of the Congolese government. However, the M23's motivations extend beyond ethnic grievances. The group has been widely accused of being a proxy force for Rwanda, a neighboring country with its own interests in the resource-rich DRC. Rwanda has a history of meddling in Congolese affairs, driven by security concerns and economic ambitions. The M23's first act of rebellion in 2012 saw them briefly capturing Goma, before being pushed back by a combined force of Congolese and UN troops. This initial victory was short-lived, but it provided a blueprint for their current offensive. The group's resurgence highlights the unresolved tensions and the cyclical nature of violence in the region. Rwanda's shadow looms large over the conflict in the DRC. Accusations of Rwandan support for the M23 are not mere speculation, but are backed by substantial evidence. The United Nations, independent analysts and human rights organizations have all documented the presence of Rwandan troops and military equipment within M23 ranks. Rwanda vehemently denies these allegations, claiming that its involvement in the DRC is limited to pursuing Rwandan Hutu rebels operating within Congolese territory. This claim, however, rings hollow in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The Rwandan government's motivations for supporting the M23 are complex and multifaceted. Some analysts argue that Rwanda views the M23 as a buffer against Hutu militias that pose a threat to its security. Others point to Rwanda's economic interests in the DRC, particularly its control over lucrative mineral resources. Regardless of the motivations, Rwanda's involvement has fueled the flames of conflict, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis and undermining regional stability. It has also drawn international condemnation, with many countries calling for sanctions and diplomatic pressure on Rwanda to cease its support for the M23. The conflict in the DRC is not just about territorial gains or political power. It is, at its core, a human tragedy. The ongoing violence has had a devastating impact on the civilian population, who are bearing the brunt of the suffering. The M23's advance has displaced over 1 million people, forcing them to flee their homes and seek refuge in overcrowded and unsanitary camps. These displaced individuals, many of whom are women and children, face hunger, disease, and the constant threat of violence. Reports of human rights abuses are rampant, including extrajudicial killings, torture, and sexual violence. Armed groups, including the M23, operate with impunity, targeting civilians with terrifying brutality. The conflict has created a climate of fear and lawlessness, where basic human rights are routinely violated. The humanitarian crisis in the DRC is reaching catastrophic proportions. Aid agencies are struggling to meet the overwhelming needs of the displaced population. The international community must act decisively to address this crisis, providing humanitarian aid, protecting civilians, and holding perpetrators of human rights abuses accountable. Section 5. International Condemnation, a Chorus of Concern. The international community has responded to the M23's capture of Goma with a mix of condemnation, concern, and calls for action. The United Nations Security Council has condemned the rebel advance and demanded the M23's immediate withdrawal from Goma. Several countries, including the United States, France, the United Kingdom, and Germany, have expressed deep concern over the escalating violence and the humanitarian crisis. These countries have called for Rwanda to cease its support for the M23 and have threatened to impose sanctions if it fails to do so. The African Union and regional blocs have also added their voices to the chorus of condemnation. They have called for dialogue and a peaceful resolution to the conflict, emphasizing the importance of respecting the DRC's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Despite the widespread condemnation, the international community's response has so far been insufficient to deter the M23 or to compel Rwanda to change course. More robust action, including targeted sanctions and diplomatic pressure, is needed to address the root causes of the conflict and to prevent further bloodshed. Section 6. Uncertain future, predicting the trajectory of conflict. The future of the conflict in the DRC remains uncertain. The M23's capture of Goma has significantly altered the dynamics of the conflict, raising fears of a wider war and a deepening humanitarian crisis. The M23 has declared its intention to stay in Goma and has hinted at further territorial ambitions. The group's ultimate objectives remain unclear, but their actions suggest a desire to exert greater control over the eastern DRC and to challenge the authority of the Congolese government. Rwanda's continued support for the M23 is a major factor influencing the trajectory of the conflict. As long as Rwanda continues to provide military and logistical support to the rebels, the M23 will remain a potent force on the battlefield. The Congolese government, weakened by internal divisions and corruption, faces an uphill battle in its efforts to regain control of the lost territory. The Congolese army, poorly equipped and lacking in morale, has proven to be no match for the M23's superior firepower and organization. The international community's response will also play a crucial role in shaping the conflict's trajectory. A robust and coordinated international response, including sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and support for the Congolese government, could help to contain the violence and pave the way for a negotiated settlement. Section 7. Life under siege, adapting to a new reality. For the people of Goma, the M23 takeover has ushered in a new and uncertain reality. The city, once a bustling hub of commerce and culture, is now caught in the grip of conflict, its streets patrolled by armed rebels. The presence of the M23 has had a profound impact on daily life. The city's economy has been crippled, with businesses shuttered and trade disrupted. Schools and hospitals are struggling to function, depriving residents of essential services. The M23 has imposed its own rules and regulations, creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. Freedom of movement is restricted, and dissent is met with swift and harsh reprisals. The rebels' control over the city has left residents feeling trapped and vulnerable. Despite the challenges, the people of Goma are resilient. They are finding ways to adapt to the new reality, seeking out alternative sources of income, supporting each other through informal networks, and clinging to hope for a better future. Section 8. Beyond the battlefield, seeking paths to peace. While the guns continue to roar in the DRC, the search for peace must remain paramount. A lasting solution to this long-standing conflict requires addressing the root causes, which lie in a complex web of historical grievances, political instability, ethnic tensions, and competition for resources. Dialogue, however challenging, remains the only viable path to peace. The Congolese government, armed groups, regional actors, and the international community must engage in good faith negotiations to find a political solution that addresses the legitimate concerns of all parties. This will require compromise and a willingness to move beyond the entrenched positions that have fueled the conflict for decades. Justice and accountability for human rights abuses must be an integral part of any peace process, as must efforts to promote reconciliation and healing. The road to peace will be long and arduous, but it is a journey that must be undertaken. The human cost of inaction is simply too high. Section 9. Whispers of Hope, the long road to reconciliation. Despite the grim realities of the present, glimmers of hope can be found in the resilience of the Congolese people and the ongoing efforts to build peace. Across the country, individuals and communities are working tirelessly to heal the wounds of conflict and to create a more just and equitable society. Civil society organizations are playing a vital role in promoting dialogue, mediating disputes, and advocating for human rights. Women, in particular, are emerging as powerful voices for peace, demanding a seat at the negotiating table and advocating for solutions that address their unique needs and experiences. The international community can support these efforts by providing financial and technical assistance, strengthening governance and the rule of law, and promoting sustainable development. Investing in education, healthcare, and economic opportunity is crucial for breaking the cycle of violence and creating a more prosperous future for all Congolese. The road to reconciliation and lasting peace in the DRC will be long and challenging, but it is a journey worth taking. The Congolese people deserve a future free from violence and fear, a future where they can live in dignity and security. The international community has a moral obligation to support them in their pursuit of this vision.